Good afternoon. This is Tracy with KOGmissions.com, and I am here with Brother Larry Rankin. He's a missionary to the Philippines, and we're really excited to hear about his story, his journey, and where that has taken him over the years and the future of his missionary work. So welcome, Larry.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you're doing this.
If you could just start a little bit with your background and what first got you interested in the mission work in the Philippines, and share the process of where you are today with that ministry with us, please.
Well, in the beginning, I had no idea that there was any Church of God in the Philippines. The start of the Church of God in the Philippines was 1960. Brother Ortiguero had contacted Harold Doan, the editor of the Restitution Herald. And from that, later in the year, Harold made a trip there and baptized Brother Ortiguero and Brother Gabanes. And over the next 3 years, that developed to the point that Brother Ortiguero was brought to the States and met many people in the Church of God. This result of that was that there was a support for him, which caused a fairly rapid expansion of the Church of God in the Philippines. And I only know about that story from interviewing people that were there. But the first that any of us in the Kashmir church knew anything about it was my father was invited to go to Japan to share with somebody, and my uncle Bill Wachtel had known Brother Ortiguero and had met him when he was in the States, and told my father that if he's going to Japan, he should go to Philippines also and meet Brother Ortiguero. My father didn't even realize there was any church in the Philippines. But he did manage to make the contact and go there for a week. And when he came home, he had a very exciting report about the people there that were involved with the church, their poverty, and the level of interest in reading and studying the Bible, the amount of people that knew English. We were comparing it with our outreach in Mexico, which we had going on at that time. It was very difficult because we didn't know Spanish. The people there didn't know English. So we were trying to train people to speak Spanish for going to Mexico. Well, this provided a different opportunity. And in our excitement, the plans developed. My father's first trip was in 1975, and he brought home videos that didn't have sound, but we were able to see the people, see their faces, and get a personal contact that way. And so we sent my father and mother in 1976. They spent a month there and went to all the places that the church was active. In 1977, we developed that into Bible school team. We sent 5 people to do Bible schools in those places. And that was teaching children in the daytime, teaching adults in the evenings. And of course, it was translated, but there was friendships developed with people that spoke English too. In 1978 was my first trip. I joined the Bible school team, and I was there for a month. I went from 135 pounds down to 115 pounds in that month. So you can imagine some of the stress and everything, but a 23-year-old doesn't really feel that. It was just a totally amazing experience. Made lots of friends and had a strong desire to go back. However, that was the year that I was starting a family, and 5 of us in our church decided to have a logging business, so that all started up, and so I was fully engaged in all of those things. So I didn't go back to the Philippines. In the early 80s, my family broke up. My wife left me, and we amicably parted, and I let her take responsibility for the children. So I was alone. It was convenient for me to do something. And the logging business also went away. And by 1985, I was really just kind of lost. And a good friend in the church advised me to just find something that I really wanted to do and make a new life. and I chose going to the Philippines.
Fantastic.
As a result, 1985, I got involved with the Bible school team. We didn't actually go until January of 1986. And I did the Bible schools and renewed friendships and came home enthusiastic about going back. I was selling apple cider at the Pike Place Market in Seattle. So I just had a cardboard box. And since all that money was cash, mostly $1 bills, I would just put most of it in the box. And by 1987, I had enough money to just do a 2-month trip, fully self-sponsored. And I realized that the blessing that comes from doing that is so huge that that's the most important thing I could do. So starting in 1987, I just committed to that. Up till now, I work self-employed, and I put the money in the box every year. And when I get to the Philippines, I stay long enough to spend it all and go home without any. And that's been my commitment to the Lord. And I'll probably just continue doing that as long as I can.
Do you have people back here in the States that help you from this side and support the work that you're doing and the communications and things like that?
Well, yes. The number one is Carol Zacher. She's a church member here at Kashmir, Washington, and she's been close to me. In fact, she's the one that encouraged me to go in the first place. She really takes care of all this side of the water things that have to happen directly with what I do. However, the Kashmir Church has a great involvement. I think more than 100 people from the Kashmir Church have gone to the Philippines to work in the work. So there are lots of other involvements. My father started going there in 1975. By 2000, he was making 4 trips a year. And he passed away in 2007 in the Philippines. And so the last 30 years of his life were pretty much devoted to that work. His cousin, Ron Rankin, he retired in 1995. And from 1995 till 2010, he made 2 or 3 trips a year over there doing his own work. He largely did what we call a local seminar. He would go to a small place, a small village. They would just invite anybody they wanted and that could come, and the Kashmir Church sponsored his trips. So it was basically an outreach to anybody that might listen, and resulted in baptisms and a development of the church in various places. My father's work was, in the first 20 years, was heavily involved with the existing church. And the existing church was broken because Brother Ortiguero had gotten corrupted, and a result was he left the church, and there was no more financial help for the ministers, and everything kind of stopped. That happened in 1979. And so in 1981, what we were doing there was basically reconnaissance, finding who was left. And so taking that group that was left and getting them to keep the faith and try to grow and mature into a church that worked without financial support from America was my father's number one mission.
Could you
He
share
didn't
a little
live.
bit, I'm sorry, Larry, could you share a little bit about how that happens? Because I know a lot of ministries, and every ministry you need to take on individually because there are differences in different countries and things like that. But in terms of the Philippines, what do they want most from you or us as Americans? And how do you handle things when people know that you're the American and, we need, health issues or food or, things like that? How is that handled, and how does that help grow the church there? I know you've got some, exciting things to share about that too.
Yes, I do, because with my father being involved with the old church, it was an endless problem, because the first thing, the Philippines has been a dominated society, dominated by foreigners since the 1600s. So Spain, Mexico, then the United States. And so the tendency of Filipinos is just ingrained to be dependent on foreign money. So when the Church of God started, Brother Ortiguero was looking for someone who he had discovered what the truth was. He was looking for a church that had that kind of teaching. So when he found it, that was exciting for him. But what he knew to do is what all Filipinos did: find support from America and use it to get out and spread the word. So that was what he did. And that pretty much across the board in the Philippines is the way that all churches have developed. And so he didn't know any different, but he wasn't really capable of it either. And I don't know how many people are capable of handling that kind of a situation, because you have to think he had 9 children and a wife and a whole bunch of grandchildren that were all dependent on him. He couldn't even send his children to school without having some kind of support from the outside. He'd already been preaching in a church that was supporting him from America. So it just had to be personal support in order for anything to happen. And then, of course, the people that he got involved would look for the same thing. So when it collapsed, honestly, the reason it collapsed was the General Conference was doing the support, and they just ran out of money. That particular time, they just ran out of money, and so they had to say, "We're sorry, we can't continue to do this right now." And so he just went looking for another church that could help him do the same thing. Well, all the preachers that stayed working then did that because of my father. And I'm sure at the start they assumed that my father would just kind of take over and the Kashmir Church would provide him with the finances and so on. But that's never been the way that the Kashmir Church operated.
Mm-hmm.
Our way of operating was we will do the work that we can afford to do and inspire you to do whatever you can afford to do. So basically, instead of giving Filipinos the money and saying, "You do the work," it was, "Here we come. We're coming to do the work because we know you can't do it." So we were just sending teams in there and doing the work. Okay, that took a while. And basically, the generation of preachers that were from Brother Ortiguero's time never really adjusted. There's only one of them that's still alive, and he's not really active any longer. But that just couldn't be removed by teaching. It's too ingrained in their whole society. So the next generation, their children, were the ones that could go around with us, do the translating and observe, and it gradually kind of sunk in. And we still have a lot of resistance, but it kind of sunk in gradually that, hey, it isn't going to be support. We're going to have to support ourselves. Well, in the meantime, the economic situation in the Philippines was developing. The Philippines is not a third world country any longer. They already have a good economic system, and things are moving, and everybody, is either getting a job or will soon. People are educated. So it's maybe timely, maybe by God's plan, that we were there during that gap to inspire and get them through it. And my father's dream was to see the Filipinos actually say, "We can do this. We'll just go out, I'll sacrifice that. I just won't buy a car. I'll go do the church work." And which is the way that we did it. Well, sad to say, at the point that he died, he really didn't see that with the Luzon church. And the Philippines is geographically divided in 3 parts. Luzon in the north, that's the largest island. Visayas is the center. It's a lot of small islands. Mindanao in the south, which is a fairly large island. And in the other half of the story is that in 1990, I was introduced to somebody from Mindanao who invited me to go there. So in 91, Arlen Rankin and I went there and with some translators discovered, some interested people. By 92, a family of our church in Luzon had moved down there. So that gave us a second opportunity. In the 91 trip, we met Elizabeth Moderable, our first contact that wasn't an Ilocano speaking person. And by 94, she was baptized. And in 95, she took us around and introduced us to her relatives all over the two southern parts of the Philippines, Visayas and Mindanao. So we kind of had an explosion. Well, those people came into the church in a totally different way. So none of them were preachers to begin with. They were just people, and their background was Church of Christ, but they mostly Church of Christ, some Baptist. They weren't a background of Church of God. So they were going to leave what they were involved in to have this faith. So they were open to all those ideas. And their first introduction to the faith was a self-sacrificing teacher. So right from the start, what they thought the faith was self-sacrificing. And we back that up with teaching the faith of Abraham, because the faith of Abraham is twofold. You have the faith of Abraham, which is what he believed, which is the basis for our belief system. And you also have what Abraham did, which made him considered faithful and righteous. So if by teaching those together and observing the listener and seeing which way they're leaning and teaching the other way to kind of bring them back to the middle, you're teaching them the sacrifices at the same time as you're teaching them the doctrine. As the two grow and they're witnessing the example of someone who's self-sacrificing to teach them, they're automatically going to want to do the same. And they can support it scripturally. So the church in Mindanao and Visayas has a completely different training and a completely different progress. So in many ways, we have to work with them differently. Fortunately, we're now in the fourth generation of the church in Luzon. And the third generation pretty much has caught on to the idea. And one of the things we did to do that was take the ones who looked like they were going to get it, take them to Mindanao with us and immerse them in how those people did the faith. And also bringing people from Mindanao to Luzon so that they interfaced and built friendships. Okay, another total aspect of that started in 1992. We felt that our church camps that we do in America for the youth are really important because that's the future of your church. And we all know that here in America. You and I grew up like that. So we thought we got to do that over there too. If we're going to have a future, we got to get these young people involved and learning how to be the church. So we didn't really have anything in Mindanao at that time, but for Luzon, we were able to collect 56 single people. They ranged in age from 12 to 40. Single people that had shown interest of one kind or another, and we thought there's some potential for them. 6 of us went from Kashmir and did 7 days of seminar with music, teaching them music theory, everything from doctrinal lessons to how to sacrifice, everything we could put in it. And many of those young people are the leaders in the church today. That turned out to be a huge success. And then every year after that, we did a youth camp of some sort for those people. In 2002, we had what we called the reunion seminar, where we had as many as we could get of the people that were at that one 10 years before. that could come, even if they were married, and be involved there with the generation of youth. And I think we were over 100 at that one. And we also had 13 participants from Mindanao and Visayas. So that, and there was 14 American young people that went to it. So it was quite a mix and a really big shoot of enthusiasm for everybody everywhere, and gave a whole new set of enthusiasm to the idea of a big youth seminar. And these seminars are not like our camps. Here in Washington, our camp is, the classes are 9 to 11 in the morning, and their activity in the afternoon, a campfire in the evening. I think that's pretty common all over America, the way it's done. But over there, we called it a seminar because breakfast is at 7, classes start at 8 and go all the way to 12. Lunch is from 12 to 1, and then the classes start at 1:30 and go to 6 o'clock, and then there's dinner, and then the campfire starts at 7:30, and we probably put another class in that. So it was like, it's a seminar. It's more like you would go to a seminar if you were a doctor going to learn all the new medicines. You know, it's just a cramming of college course. And so we continued to do that at whatever level we could. In 2003, we had the first one in Mindanao, and for Mindanao wide. And then in 2012, the Flag Center Church and the Kashmir Church went together to have another fairly large deal like that. And we had 5 days with the youth and 4 days for the whole church, old and young, a huge gathering. So and that was done twice. I guess it's 2009 and 2012. That was done twice, and then it was obviously too big. It couldn't happen again. So in 14, we went back to just youth, and we did a resort instead of a church-owned facility. We used a resort, which allowed us to have a bigger group and have the meals catered and all that sort of thing. It's rather expensive, but totally productive. And we did that in 14, 16, 18, and those three, we started with about 100, then 120, and the last one was 150 between the age of 13 and 21, all single.
Are these people then, Larry, that are already active in the churches, or is it like, oh, I'm asking my friend if they want to come along? Who are the people that respond to this, and do they realize it's not just a fun get together, that this is training and it's for a purpose? Because what I'm hearing is you really are focused on making disciples that make disciples.
Yes, so that has migrated. In every case, in every kind of work, we've had a migration. So starting with Bible schools, it's teaching children. In the start, you just go to the village and teach. But it comes to the point where, no, we don't need 60 kids. We need the 8 that are progressive. But we don't not teach the 60 also. So what we do is still go to the village and teach whatever comes. But then we started doing Bible schools where we'll put 2 villages together, and we bring the children away from their home to a place to do it, so that it's more like a classroom setting. And then that's slightly more advanced. And so we're not just out there finding anybody that's interested. And we're doing that at all levels. So we do it all the way up to preachers. But with the youth seminars, in the start, it was pretty much anybody that was willing to go. If they weren't going to teach our doctrine, probably we didn't want them to go. But anybody that was willing to learn it, that's okay. But in 2018, we had 150, and I was responsible for who got to go. So I really had to narrow it down. It was pretty much, we're looking for teachers here. So the latest on that, this is happening right now. Kathy, my sister, and I, just reviewing the whole story, realized that the 3 that we just did, if we repeat that, we're going to have 250, and it's a physical impossibility. So we said, okay, what are we going to do? Well, our first idea was to split it, make a junior for high school age and a senior for college age. Well, something that happened a couple of years ago, the Philippines decided to move from a 10-year public school system to a 12-year public school system. And it threw a big kink in everything. And they have a different vacation time for colleges than they do for high schools. They have a 2-month summer off, but it was a different time of the year. So it really messed up everything we were doing. So what we've done, we revised our whole plan. And so Kathy and her husband, Sam Foster, went and met with a team that I chose of 10 couples. These are the couples that have basically come from the 92 start for the Luzon couples, and from Mindanao as early as we could go back, that have been involved. They're people that chose to basically to marry in the faith. They have strong church families, and we chose these couples. We got them together in Manila with Kathy and Sam for a couple of days in February and handed off the whole thing, the whole project. So they have it. They're doing the national seminar. We're just going to fund it. So we told them, you can have 150 people, and you can choose a resort to have it in. We've got a big enough budget. We're fine with it. It's about $25,000 to do it. And so they've gone to work, and they set the criteria for who's going to be a student by they have about 100 memory verses required, not just books of the Bible, but you need to have written a thesis, and you have to have memorized the Beatitudes and several other groups of verses. And they set the mark really high. Now, these are not all teachers, but they're responsible people, the ones who are putting this together. However, even though they're not really teachers, all of them volunteered to teach one class, and then they're choosing in the 20 to 30-year-olds, the professional teachers that are in the church, people that teach for a living, and giving them the bulk of the teaching assignments, because they'll do actually a more fine job for seminar type teaching. So, and this is going to allow them to use their language. Always before, anything like that was conducted in English without translators. So I'm certain there's a lot of people that couldn't really follow well. And this time they will use Tagalog, which is their national language, and English. And so they'll be able to make sure that all the students are able to keep up. And all we'll have to do is observe it.
That's fantastic. So I think we talked a while back, because I know different countries. I was in Russia, and a lot of times you would see people, half the people that come, they're coming because they truly are seeking to know God and truth. And then the other half, they are thinking, oh, these are Americans, we can talk or, English with them, practice, or we can maybe get something from them. In the past, that had been what you saw in a lot of churches over there. And you had shared with me that the Philippines was a little different than that, and how they looked at Americans and what they expected or wanted from them and the respect they had for them. Yeah,
because of Philippines being a part of the United States for 40 years, and then the MacArthur thing where the Japanese were driven out by the Americans. Americans were seen by any generation that could remember that event as heroes. So there's a stigmatism that goes that if an American comes, you know, hi, Joe, it's just totally friendly, that we're automatic friends. Well, that's kind of gone. The generation from the war is all dead now. And so what we have is a very close friendship based on a desire to be American because of the television. So you probably see that everywhere else, that TV tends to come from America. It tends to highlight American living and not necessarily real American living, but TV shows something that gives people an idea of what would be cool if they were in America. So that has become the largest part of the interest of Filipinos in America, is the level of interest in living in America, living an American lifestyle. So we have that stigmatism to deal with. So early on, I decided to learn language. And by learning language, it really helped me a lot to be able to work through those problems. The first thing that I discovered is that if I could say 2 words in their language, I could get a crowd. Well, when you're doing outreach, evangelism, a crowd is a great start, you know, people to listen. So that right off, that's the first thing. If you can speak a few words, they're willing to get closer to you. If they think that they can't talk to you, why would they even bother? They just go away. So that's the first advantage. The second advantage is in understanding some of their language or understanding more about their culture, you actually can detect their level of interest and what kind of interest they had. So what I discovered early on was that I was rapidly gaining an ability to analyze where the other Americans were not. So Arlen was the one who first expressed that to me. He said, you know, I'm older. They always want me to do the teaching, but if I need to be with you because you know what needs to be taught. And that was true. And so from that, we realized that, okay, what's going on here is you have to be close enough with people, have a close enough relationship with them to actually get how much they're developing and so on. Okay, with my experience, and I'm now 42 years of going there, I operate as though I'm one of them in most of their cultures, not all of them, because there's a lot of different cultures in the Philippines. But in most of them, I can operate just like I'm one of them. So I'm aware rather quickly of how interested they are. And what I've done by having 3 to 5 Filipinos with me in my trips for the last 20 years is trained them what you do, what you look for to get the right result. So what it amounts to is you need to kind of splash to get people to come, and being a foreigner does that really well, but you don't have to be a foreigner. All you have to do is be different. Mm. So if you stand up and shout that I'm different and show it, you'll get a crowd. That kind of works generally. So if you can stress where we're different than everybody else in your teaching, in your actions, in your attitude, everything, you're going to get some people to observe. And then you just observe them. In the case of adults, you're going to observe individuals that either have a Bible background and feel confrontation, or don't have any Bible background and are really curious. Mm-hmm. And mostly you have the really curious. But we found that working with the Ilonggos in Mindanao, the Ilonggo culture, they've been permeated with Baptist teaching. So we got a lot greater response of the, whoa, you mean we don't go to heaven? No, I can't believe that. But but they're equally great opportunities. And so when you see in the crowd the individual that is interested either to defend what they believe already or just to find out what the Bible said, either case, you zone in on that individual, and the others will follow if they want to. Maybe they'll only be the bridge to somebody else, but you focus on that individual. You answer their questions. You go to their house to sleep. You eat with them. You do everything to try to improve that relationship, and then see where it goes from there. Basically, it to the Filipinos, their culture says you have to be totally hospitable to everybody. So, for example, their culture demands that if you don't have any food in your home, and there's a visitor, whether it's your next door neighbor or somebody from America, if there's a visitor, anybody just walking down the road, you call them in your house to eat, you go to the little store, you borrow the food that you couldn't afford to buy for yourself, put it on the table, feed your visitor, tell them how wonderful the visit was, say goodbye to them, and then don't eat yourself. That's how their hospitality is. And if we go and visit somebody, Filipino or American, or it doesn't really matter. If you go to someone's house and you sleep in their house, you have sealed the friendship. It's forever, and it's like we're going to die for each other just by sleeping in the house. So that's something that is huge. And by and large, missionaries don't have any concept of it. That's not part of the missionary thing. It isn't how it works. But for us, we discovered that in the Philippine culture, all you got to do is just meld right into their society and you're in. So you just choose the person who's really looks interested and do that. Now for children, we can go in a village, and the fact that somebody showed up, the kids just come running. They want to interface. So you just want to hear a Bible story? You want to hear a Bible story? Oh yeah, and they all sit down, and they want to be educated. So they sit down, you just do the Bible story, and you can observe, usually there will be a child that kind of stands out, that's wants to answer the questions. You can just see their energy for it. So you zone in on that child. You tell them, hey, I'm gonna do this again in an hour. Go find all your friends and bring them. And put them in the middle. Well, they're the one who invited their friends, so automatically it's like they're the assistant teacher. And you just work that system to make it grow. And the same thing in the adults. Once you've observed the adult that's kind of interested, you say, well, is there somebody in this village that that knows about the Bible or wants to learn about the Bible? Go get them. Well, when they bring their friend, now they're representing you to their friend. So you've moved them into actually being the assistant teacher. Mm-hmm. So what I've done, even at the level of preachers, to go into a village and visit a few of the pastors of the churches, and one that seemed, wow, that's kind of interesting, like that. I said, well, who's the other preachers here? Let's go talk to them. And then what happened is they became not only the translator, but they're now defending what you're teaching. So we have a preacher in the Philippines, preacher of the Church of God now, very active, Cebuano speaking. He attended one of the things that Anthony Buzzard did. It was basically a knock down the Trinity seminar. He attended that, but it didn't affect him particularly. But a friend of his who was a pastor went, yeah, that's kind of right. I think so. So that guy wrote to Anthony and wanted some follow-up. Anthony handed it off to us, and I went and visited. Well, the first guy, the one who wasn't really interested, he had a little bit of understanding of how to operate a computer, and this is when computers were really new. So he he could do the computer and make an email. So they had to work together to get the email. So when I got there, met the two of them, and the one who was ready to immediately adopt our doctrine, of course, was a fake. He did adopt our doctrine, but he ran off and left his wife and 7 kids for another woman, and and he still is teaching our doctrine until now, but in a situation that's not respectable. So as you have to realize, in the Philippines, divorce is illegal and unheard of. So he just basically abandoned his family for another woman, and that's not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
So
Larry, when you go into different villages, or you travel to different places, how often is it that you're just like, well, let's go here and say, hey, we're speaking, and see who comes? Or is it, I've heard like family members, oh, I have a family member, a relative that lives over in this village, and they're open to hearing. And so you're going already knowing somebody there that might be open to listening?
we are not doing any outreach by just going somewhere. I have observed it a couple of times where I was there and the Filipinos said, oh, let's just go over there, and nothing ever came of it. We really are just following up leads, and we have never been able to follow up all the leads. So there's leads that are hanging out there. 100 people could be going to the Philippines and doing what I do. I think there would still be more leads than we could follow up. So that really isn't even an issue. I think I would be willing to try some of the other, but we don't have any opportunity to, because we're busy with the leads.
So where do you get these leads? Again, from friends, family saying they know somebody, or they talk to somebody, or?
Well, the original church, of course, that was there before I was there,
Mm-hmm.
87, my mission, I thought, would be to go visit them and look for the church people that were lost, because there was a few years gap there where they kind of got lost. So I got a few people to go with me, and we did that. I think I completed that mission about 97. So about 10 years that I had that as a part of my mission. And until we found everybody, then that kind of wore out. But by 98, there was some of the people that said, I have my family over here, So we took up a few of those. And then in 91, of course, going to Mindanao that contact came because of a marriage. And then, so that actually just dramatically, exponentially increased the potential. And then because we met Elizabeth, and then now everybody that Elizabeth knows or is related to is an opportunity. And as of now, she's been 25 years in the work, never got married, just chose to stay single, do the work. And she's just a huge factor in the church. But she's also been there long enough that we have a generation behind her who's willing to make those kind of sacrifices. They're either choosing to not marry, or getting married and not having children for the church work, or getting married and having only one child for the church work, or however many children they have, they're just stopping so they can do church work. I can show you why that's biblically good, but it should just make sense to people that the more you entangle yourself with worldly things, the less you're going to be able to do evangelism. And family is worldly things, whether we like to think so or not. It's natural, it's not wrong. God gave us that and we do it. But if we choose to leave it out, it increases our opportunity for the church work. So that's a really growing level of participation. So if we teach the sacrifice good enough, these people will actually reach out at any level that they can.
That's a focus, is teaching them biblically and from example what the cost is of discipleship and to be a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And that so it's whole life.
Yeah, and so what happens is if you start teaching from the story of Abraham, which we do all the time, start teaching from the story of Abraham, within 1 or 2 Bible studies, 90% of the people have quit. And that's just fine. We don't need those. Because the example of Abraham tells them they're not going to do it anyway. Maybe later they'll come back and say they want to, okay. But for right now, that's just going to interfere with their life too much. So we tend, in an older existing church, which all of us grew up in here in America, in an older existing church, we tend to be very patient and want to work with our cousin. They used to come to church and they're not coming now. I got to go visit them and try to go to church. I shed that all off a long time ago. I don't mess with that, even here. I realized, you know what? God is pointing me to the people who are interested. Why am I resisting going to the people who are interested so that I can try to help these people who aren't? Never mind the people who aren't. I got to move on, work with the people who are interested. And that's, I think that's a huge problem with believers everywhere, is we tend to feel for the person that we're close to so much that we don't reach out to the person we're not close to. And it just is a human tendency that we have to deal with. But
what kind of people are you looking for? Like you have said that you bring teams over there and Bible teams in the future and what you've had in the past. What kind of young people or older people are you looking for? People that can teach or people just willing to go?
Are you meaning Americans?
From Americans, yes. If some people are listening to this and they said, well, I would love to take part in some of that work, what kind of people would you even take a look at to be part of that?
It's pretty much everybody. And here's why. The church is already fully developed in the Philippines, but not all of the Philippines is in the church. So you have every level of, to work in. So I really doubt if there's anybody that wouldn't be qualified other than a medical problem or age or something like that to help. What happens is I look at the volunteer and say, okay, this is what you could do. Mariah and Sarah, when they went, you look at their age and what their experience is in the church and so on. And we said, okay, here's a huge opportunity for you. We're having a seminar and somebody's going to teach the children. There's 3 days of teaching you can do. Wow. It was a win-win, everybody wins from it. And I've had lots of older retired people who said to me, oh, I don't think I can sleep on a bamboo floor. I said, well, you don't have to. You don't have to. There's plenty of church people that have very nice beds. They have just as nice a bed as you have. And they even have a toilet in their house. It doesn't flush by a handle. You'll have to pour water into it. But, you can do this. It's not that hard. So if you're willing to go and just make friends with that family, you'll find that you're participating and you can develop a relationship that will last forever because you'll be with those people forever. And so there's just room for everybody.
And so what would like those future Bible schools look like, or training? Like you said, you do seminars, you would have certain, topics that they go through. What does a Bible school look like over there?
A Bible school looks like this. Not really announced for the most part. They just show up where the church people are usually, or they're going to their relative's house, a place to stay. Just show up. The kids come running. They just got to see people, and we're going to have a Bible story. Go find your friends. We're going to have a Bible story, and they gather up. And the first time it'll usually be 20 to 30. And then after that, you're down to 10, and then maybe only 5 that really continue. But then just teach them really simple Genesis stories, the flood, the creation, Cain and Abel. If you're It depends on what you see in the village, what their parents are doing, what you think will actually open their heart up, and tell them the stories. They love to learn memory verses, songs. You do all the songs, the kids' songs. They love that, and we're now writing songs in their languages all the time, and they sing, and they're so excited. Well, they even do religious songs at school, so they all know some. 5-year-olds will teach 3-year-olds. So if you have 5 and 3-year-olds in your class, as soon as you finish the class, the 5-year-olds automatically telling the 3-year-olds how to learn the verse. The 3-year-olds come back and they know the memory verse a lot of times better than the 8-year-olds, because they're just open. So it's really simple. And we've discovered that a paper, a Xerox copy of a picture with a part of a verse on it or something from the story, and cut crayons, you can triple the number of people that are participating, and you can also get a better observation on why they're participating. Candy we don't like. That's not a good idea. It's been tried. That's a terrible idea. If you give candy to them, you'll get everybody to come the next time, and you'll have a mess. But a color picture with a verse on it, and they have to memorize the verse, you really can start to observe who wants to learn. Mm-hmm. And I want to tell you a specific story about that. Education is multifaceted. We tend to look at school system type education, where there's a curriculum, and think of that as education. It is not. It's one kind of education. And so I'm going to tell you the story about Annie. When we went to Bugnay in Kalinga, because one of our preachers had some relatives there, and he took us there to try to talk to them. Nothing came of that. But there was a religious organization from Australia called YWAM, World Youth with a Mission. They had built a chapel in the village and had an elder that was responsible for doing whatever they did there. I don't know what it was. And after the first Bible study, he came and asked us to use the chapel. Why not? So we did. And after that meeting, I took the kids outside and taught them around the walls of Jericho, running in a circle and falling down for an hour. And so I felt really strong that we should go back there. I wasn't personally the one that went back, but Vaughn Corbally, another teacher from here, it worked out that it worked in 2 of his trips. And in his second trip, he had Filipino preachers with him. They actually baptized that man and his neighbor and his neighbor's daughter. The neighbor was killed 1 week after the baptism, because that tribe and a tribe from the other province that share a boundary have a war that's been going on for about 100 years. And so people die often. Well, he was out in his field, and somebody took a pot shot at him and killed him a week after he was baptized. So his daughter and Gregorio, the original guy, were our 2 church members there. So here I went up there, and we started working. Well, there was a 7-year-old girl that I only know now that she was 7. She looked like she was 12. She was really tall. And she came. She helped wash the dishes. She just hung around, running errands, whatever we needed. She was there for the Bible school. We weren't doing color pictures. We were just telling a story. We didn't really observe her scholastic ability. We just observed that she was always there. And at the age of 13, I asked her to go with me. We were going to Gregorio's daughter, lived a 2-hour hike up the mountain. We were going to her place to share, and this girl was always there. So I said, "You want to go with us?" And yeah, she went with us up the mountain. And I took videos of her climbing the mountain stuff. She was so tall and gangly. It was really interesting. But we still didn't observe her scholastic ability, even my helpers who'd been with me for many years. And so when she was 16, I thought, well, I want to take her out in the trip, outside of this village. She's probably never been anywhere, you know. And so I invited her, and her mother said, okay. So we climbed up to the road. It was like a 20-minute hike up just to get to the road. We got up to the road, and the one Jeep a day that goes by, we got on it, and we were on the top of the Jeep because it's full inside. And so my two helpers were toward the front, and then her, and then I was at the back, sitting on the side of the roof with our feet hanging over. And about the second curve we went around, my feet were wet, and it wasn't raining, and I wondered why my feet are wet, and looked at her. She had just vomited on my feet. She had no ability. She had never gone anywhere in a vehicle. She didn't realize car sickness, you know, it just hit her. So 4 hours later, we got to town, and we nursed her through that. Okay, the next 3 weeks, she did everything. She was the best volunteer you could have, but nothing about the Bible. She just washed the clothes, washed the dishes. You know, when we hiked, we can do this, we can do that. She understood well enough, because we were speaking Ilocano, she understood well enough that we didn't observe that she couldn't read or write. We didn't know that. And so, and actually her Ilocano was very simple because that isn't her language. But being with us, she got along. And we hiked over the mountain. She carried a huge load. She was super strong. We hiked over the mountain 2 days hike to go to our last place. And we were stranded there for 5 days in a storm, and everything was fine. And so Annie went home. Well, the next year, I said, I'm getting Annie in the trip, man. That's great. So as soon as she got with us, we sat down to have a Bible study, and I asked her to read a verse. Well, she could read and it and of kind of words, you know, in Ilocano. That was it. So I went, oh, no, she's not going to be reading. She's got to learn how to read first. That was a shock. So after the trip, I sent her to Geraldine's, my super person for my lead trip leader, sent her to Geraldine's house for 8 months. She lived with Geraldine. Geraldine lives in a region that's on the line of Tagalog and Ilocano speaking. She learned both languages, and quite rapidly. She's very smart. And so when I went back, she wasn't really reading, but she was talking fluently in both of those languages. And she told me, I'm going to learn English also. You teach me. So it started, and 4 years later, she could understand, she could read enough, and she got baptized. And then she just took over the trips. She became the team leader. And she understood the concepts about identifying interested people, what to do to get people to grow spiritually. And then we were at the end of a trip, and I had to say goodbye to her. I said, what are you going to do for the next 6 months? And she said, well, Rhoda has working at this casino changing beds. I'm going to try to get a job there. I said, okay, I'll leave you here then. You let me know if you need to go somewhere else. I'll help you. Left her there. She's 22 or like 22, 23. Left her there. Now she's 25 by that time. I left her there. Rhoda's father died. He was the elder in our church. And he had a nephew that had never listened to anything in our church because his family was devoted in the Church of Christ. But when Rhoda's father died, that nephew came to listen to the funeral. And our preacher, Lito, just taught what he would teach at a funeral. And that young man came to Lito and said, I didn't know your church didn't believe the Trinity. I don't believe the Trinity also. And so Chris immediately moved from the Trinitarian church right over to our church. And 6 months later, Annie said, we're getting married. And she married him. He's excellent. He took over preaching in that church, leading the congregation. Annie takes him all over northern Luzon, drags him out, and does Bible studies everywhere. And this year is the first time that I got to watch Annie actually teach. I had her with me in Bugnai, where she grew up, and there's 10 kids, sat down, and I said, Annie, got to teach these kids. Well, she had been translating to help the other teachers because they would teach in Tagalog or Ilocano. The kids would half get it, and she would fill in. She just sat down there and explained to them how God made Adam and how God made Eve. And I recorded it. I got this little recording that maybe you saw it. I posted it a couple of days ago on Philippines Evangelism site. And she's just the most amazing product of our work. And she's 30 years old now and has a 2-year-old. And she said, that's it. We're only having one child. And I can carry her everywhere we're doing the church work, which she has. She was 5 months pregnant when she made her first trip to Mindanao. She went with me to Visayas and Mindanao. We did a 10-day hike over the mountain. She was 5 months pregnant. We hiked highest high mountains. No problem. And at the end of the trip, she got to see everybody she wanted to see, people that she had known, people she hadn't known. And then she had the baby, and when the baby was 2 months old, after a cesarean, she put the baby on her back and went back to Bugnai and did Bible school. We don't have people that are like that, you know. So when people are volunteering, I tell you, we can find a place for you.
Mm-hmm. So when is your next Bible school, or do you just go and, I mean, obviously with the coronavirus right now, we don't know much, and you had to come back early because of that. Mm-hmm. But do you try to do that every 2 years, or what are your plans when things are kind of normal as to when you?
Well, since 2000, I've done 5 months every year for 20 years. This year, I only made it to 4 because of the virus. But my plan next year is to do 4 months to start in January. It's just a practical matter from this end. Hopefully, the virus won't be a problem and I can go and do it. I'm 65 years old, so I'm not quite up to all the things that I have done. The 10 days hike has kind of gone off the end of my chart. I think I could do it, but it happens that particular area has kind of cooled off interest-wise, so we've kind of let it go to the back. But I just have to accept the fact that I'm getting older. The other day when we were in the group session, Joe and Rebecca were there, and Shane Davis, who has been working in the Philippines since 2001, and he's in his 40s, and he asked Joe, what are you guys seeing for people to go to Africa? I mean, your age is there, and who's young and from America that's interested in following up? And Joe and Rebecca said, well, we find people that'll go once, maybe twice, but we really haven't seen anybody that's just stepping up and saying, I want to do this. And we're all kind of looking at each other in sympathy, because that's the way it is. Shane is past 40, and he's doing Africa and the Philippines, 3 months between the two every year. And, it's a strain, but God gives the workers the way they need to be. And my observation is that as hard as I tried to get Americans to pick it up, I haven't really had any luck. And so I decided maybe 10 years ago that I would be better off just focusing on the Filipinos, getting them taught, getting them out doing it. Okay, my father's dream when he was dead is about the time that I went, this really has to happen. So we started at the Kashmir Church a program that we're working with. It's going quite well. We decided that I wasn't involved in the original decision. They told me this is what we're going to do. The elders here at the church, and based on what everybody wanted to do, is we don't want to send Americans anymore. They said, if Americans want to go, they can go on their own. We don't want to send Americans. What we want to do is sponsor Filipinos. And we want them to learn to do what you're doing. So that was about 5 years ago. And I said, great, because I think that's where we're going. So what I did is I went to the Filipinos that have ability, and I said, you need to volunteer. The Kashmir Church is offering to do the financial part, but you've got to volunteer. You got to stick your neck out. You got to say, I'm going to do this. And the ones that do, don't worry about the money. We can do the money, but you're going to have to be responsible and you're going to have to step up. Well, just at that time, the Facebook thing exploded. Well, with Facebook, which is free in the Philippines, they can communicate to us what they're doing. So we have an observation and we can actually hold them accountable for what happens. So that makes it to where Americans are a lot more comfortable helping them with support. So I'm not saying that we're going back to what Ortiguero had, not at all. But what we're doing is we're taking people that we've dealt with personally and trained personally, just like we would somebody here in America, and giving them an expense budget for their trip. We're not supporting anybody. We're not, they have to find a way to make a living. And the exception to that is the elder couple. There's one elder couple that he is the best evangelist there, and they're just too old to support themselves. And so I personally support them with their food so that he and his wife can travel endlessly. But everybody else, they're having to find a way to make their living, and then we just provide the budget for their travel, and they're doing it.
So when you're over here in the States, things don't just stand still over in the Philippines. People are doing the same things that you're doing when you're there, correct?
Yeah, and that's been true all the time. It's been true ever since I first went there, that they're working. The church is active. So what changed is what they're doing, because they adjusted to follow more of the style of what I did. And now they're taking over all the seminars and everything. They send us, okay, currently our situation is 2 times a year, the Kashmir Church has a meeting where they consider evangelistic effort, from a financial perspective. And not only in the Philippines, we do stuff all over the world, but for the Philippines, we've taught the Filipinos that if you have an idea, something you want to do, you need to get that presented to us by a certain date, and then so that we can prepare it and get it in the meeting and get funding for it. Mm-hmm. Well, the business meeting get really tangled up. You get 60 to 100 people trying to decide whether that's good or not. So what we've done over a year ago is we made a volunteer committee of those of us who are active working with the Filipinos. We volunteer, and so we get all the requests by a certain date. We assess them. We write them up as a committee in a format that we can present to the church, and the church basically has a yes or no vote, one vote. And that way the church doesn't have to try to sort out all the negatives and positives. And we'd be the ones doing it anyway. It would just be in front of the rest of the people.
Right. So you shared a little bit now. Is there any last thoughts or comments in regards to the future of the church in the Philippines, where you see that going, how people can be involved in that, what you're looking at doing the rest of your life? I mean, I don't think if we're true evangelists and kingdom servants, we really don't retire.
No. Sometimes I've thought that I would seek out my Social Security and just stay in the Philippines. But, we don't really get to choose those things. Sickness comes on and different kinds of ailments and things. And, I have ailments. I have skin cancer problems, prostate trouble, and, things like that come on, and that's really going to direct where you're going to live and so on. So I really don't want to say I'm going to do such and such. But my plan is to continue my little business, which generates a huge financial support for the work in the Philippines. Probably about $40,000 last year just for my little business.
Can you share a little bit about what you do? People might be interested in that, and maybe share your Facebook page or website or anything like that. People are interested in that.
We're Art to Suit You. We're artists, and the business is Art, ARTTOSUITYOU, Art to Suit You. We have a Facebook page and a website, but our business is jewelry in category, but our real business, what we really do, is a hands-on. It's hands-on. We actually are teaching people how to use jewelry. So we have a hair product that's a pin to hold your hair. That's our number one product.
I have one. They're fantastic. Yeah, they don't come out. You can go swimming with it in.
Yeah, right. And then we have bracelets, as you can see here, like I'm wearing. And the same for your foot, bracelets, and rings for fingers and toes, and a variety of other items. But what we're doing is actually fitting. That's the word I wanted to use, fitting. We do fittings. So when you buy a piece of jewelry, how do you know that this is the one that's going to be nice for you? We do fittings. So we meet the public, we fit them to the jewelry, something that they're comfortable in and is a beautiful accessory. And we work with people's feelings to help them feel better about wearing it. And people do feel better when they wear nice things. So fortunately, I got to work with a guy for 10 years who taught me all about that. And so our art is wearable, and it's something that's beautiful, and it's very inexpensive for what it does, practical things. So what we've discovered is because we use the medium of copper, brass, and German silver, that medium is not really popular in jewelry, but it's very practical and it's not expensive. So there's a demand. And so we're going to festivals and art events and whatever, and fitting people with that kind of business. And it's proven to be very profitable for us. And we're kind of like the only people in the world that do it. So there's plenty of room, and it's been worked really well for us. So we don't intend to stop that. Sad to say, it's very hard to find people that are interested in working with us. So if I knew somebody that's interested in working in the evangelistic field, kind of like I do, on like a half a year basis, and wants to have a way to support it, we have that too. I could offer anybody the job. You could do this, what we're doing. It's not that.
Say if someone here in Minnesota said, "That sounds great, Larry, I want to do it. What do I do?" What would you tell them?
Come and see me. I'll teach you. You can either do it with us here, or I'll teach you and you can take it home. It's not that complicated.
And then you go to various fairs and festivals, and I helped Russell one year when he was selling up here in Minnesota. And you just get into those different festivals and fit people and sell the products.
Yeah, and sell the product. And we don't have to charge a lot because it's not expensive metal, and we're able to earn pretty good without making it hard for people to buy it. So it's really nice. And I think it's blessed. That's the number one thing. Always work for the blessing. We need to make the choices in our life that get God's blessing. And I believe that business has been blessed because it's devoted to the church work. So if somebody came to me and said, I want to do that business because I want to have a bigger house, I'm sorry, I'm not interested. Mm-hmm. If you want to do church work, talk to me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, I don't need competition. But so with that, I intend to do that as long as I can, maybe another 10 or 15 years or whatever. But the time that I spend in the Philippines isn't likely to grow longer in a year. It might get shorter, but it isn't likely to grow longer, because what I have discovered is that my emotional capabilities and my physical capabilities, it's pretty stressful, that much time. It's not that it's that much time in a different country, it's that it's that much time of every day in a different town. And so one of the things that we're doing now is we're planning to buy a vehicle, because public transportation wears on you. It's not the most convenient thing in the world. And I've been hiring a vehicle owned by a church member, and he drives it for free for 2 times for a month. And we use that for the mountain trips. It's a 4-wheel drive, so we don't have to worry about getting stuck or anything. And the mountains are pretty rough. But that's worked out really well. And so I'm just looking at buying a car that I can use for Luzon. Visayas and Mindanao, it's not going to work. Unfortunately, it's not going to work to do that because the cost of putting a car on a ferry is way too high. But and when you got small islands, that's what you're always doing, is getting on a ferry. So maybe 5 years from now it might be okay. But right now it isn't. But so I'm looking at how to gradually work down. The other thing is what Ron did, and I'm gradually aiming toward that, is staying longer in one place and having the church workers come to where I am instead of trying to go every place. In fact, in 5 months, I can't even go to every place the church is in 5 months. With Shane going also, we double up on about, on some, but we've basically shared. But now the Filipinos even have places that no American has gone, that they're developing the church. So it isn't like we have to go to all those places, but we do have to maintain enough contact to know that the people that we're helping financially are doing the right things. We need to witness the results of their work and so on. So I've kind of generally shifted over to that, teaching the teachers, following up with the teachers, and then, hitting as many spots as I have time left to do. So I do not involve myself with the seminars particularly. I will teach at one if it's convenient, but I don't manage them. I don't want to do that anymore. The Filipinos can do that. They're fine. And if they ask my opinion all the time, whether or not this facility will have the right rooms that they need or so on. Maybe they need my help, but that's okay. But I don't want to be a manager.
Right. And what if somebody, say there was a couple people from the United States here that said, hey, we'd love to go over to help out with Bible studies or seminars or, traveling with you. What is a responsible amount of time that would be minimal? Because I just know the expenses for travel, the couple $1,000s that you spend in that could be much better spent, giving it to the work that people are doing there.
Right.
So what would be a minimal amount of time that you would pretty much say people need to commit to?
Okay, let's just take the overall of your question. We're not in the stage of really needing another American to do evangelism. We're in the stage of getting those Filipinos to do more and more and more and supporting them doing that. So the Americans that are ideal to go are the ones who would be interested in supporting. So obviously a 6-year-old child isn't applicable, but a 12-year-old is, because 20 years from now, we're still going to have this situation and the 12-year-old is going to be the income earner. Mm-hmm. So from about age 12 and up is applicable to that. So what we want to do is build relationships. It's very similar to what we do in the church here. If you're going to work with people, you've got to know them. That's the whole idea of the general conference, is people getting together so they know each other so that they can cooperate and work together. And that's what we have to build. So the experience on the ground needs to be kind of targeted to the capabilities of the person going. And I would say financially, 2 weeks is like, if you go for less than a 2-week trip, you're not going to be happy with yourself when you went home. And if you go for 2 weeks to a month trip, you're going to be kind of unhappy with yourself, but it'll be worth it. And anything over a month, a month to 3 months, 3 months is a long trip, and I wouldn't advise anybody to do that on their first trip. There's just enough culture shock, and the food doesn't really taste good to you the first time and that kind of stuff, that you're going to get sick. So even though it's not a third world country anymore, if you went to Italy, you'd have the same thing. Things are too much different. So if you stay there long enough, you either have to become an Italian or evolve yourself into how to deal with the differences. You get tired of sitting on the porcelain. That's kind of a shock to people to sit on the porcelain, but the toilets don't have a seat in the Philippines. It's okay. Filipinos love water. They use lots of water. They wash the toilet before they use it and after they use it every time. It's clean. But it's still kind of strange to sit on the porcelain. Yeah. So there's things like that for a first timer, it's a bit of a shock.
So that they're the ones who are invested and have the relationships and want to support the work so it can continue to be done by the nationals there.
That's right. So, and it's not, if you're only going to go once, it's nice and it's good for you and it's good for them that they met you. But what we're really looking for is people that are willing to have a continuing involvement. And if you're not going to go there, you're going to be dependent on somebody else that is going there. And that's kind of like second-rate involvement. Mm-hmm. The ideal is that you would actually immerse yourself in it a little bit so that you had your own personal relationships with the people that you can work with, and you're not going through somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate you taking the time here to share with us, Larry, and it's amazing what you're doing and the sacrifices you've made. It's a great example to, I think, Christians all around the world, because Jesus did call us to follow him and leave what's behind. And there is a cost, mm-hmm. again, to that discipleship, which I think a lot of people here in the United States don't understand, that it really does cost us something. And are there any final comments or stories that you'd like to share? Yep. Oh, but one story I would like you to share that you've shared with me some time ago was in regards to a man who, I don't remember what his profession was or what, but he had come to understand the truth about loving your enemy. And he was attacked, I believe, and he had a knife with him. And after that, he wasn't going to do it. If you could share that a little bit, that would be fantastic. And then just finish up with anything that you'd like to share here at the end.
Okay. The name of that man is Tajo Dangani. He's still alive. He's 77 years old. He's very active preaching. He's in the province of Kalinga, and he is a Boot tribe of Kalinga, the same tribe as Annie. He was educated very early for his tribe. He was like the first man to get a high school education in his tribe. And after that, he became a Seventh-day Adventist preacher. He preached for 14 years for the Seventh-day Adventists. His brother, who never went to school, even grade 1, joined our faith. And they had an ongoing problem continually because education outweighs knowledge, And so, but eventually Tajo succumbed to his brother's resistance and said, okay, I'll investigate it. And it was only a year he was baptized in our faith, and then went back to the Kalinga tribes to try to convince them not to be Seventh-day Adventists. Really, he just flipped over to go back to the people that he had taught to come from pagan religion to Seventh-day Adventists, now to teach them that was wrong and bring them to the truth. It hasn't worked very well. But anyway, shortly after his conversion, I would say within 6 months, my father was doing a ministerial seminar in La Union, and so he was invited and he traveled over there. The two brothers went together actually to attend it, and on their way home, they went to Baguio, which is the vacation capital of the Philippines, simply because that's the route for them to go home. Baguio is a mile high. It's way up on the top of the mountain, and then you go up to over 7,000 feet high over high mountains in a one-day trip to get to Bontoc. And then it was at that time, it was a 6-hour trip in a Jeep to get from there to their home. And you could go around the mountains in a bus in about 20 hours. But they were doing the mountain trip. It cost less. And they got to Baguio at night and got a room. And then they went out to eat. And they had meal at a restaurant, and they're walking back to the hotel in the night down an alley. And they were jumped on. Somebody just out of the dark jumped on them from behind. And Tajo, both of them carry knives. It's just in their culture that you always have a sharp knife. And Tajo gave me a vivid illustration. He pulled the knife from his belt and just poked waist high at his back. And he felt the knife go into the flesh of the person. Well, the person ran off. Everybody ran away. And then they're standing there, and he realized his watch was missing. They had stolen his watch, but there was blood all over his knife. And it was just a reaction, a lifetime of training. And still, it really affected him. He felt terrible. He never knew who it was. He doesn't know how the result of it was or anything. All he could do was just go home and feel bad. And so those, if it wasn't like he stabbed an innocent person that would go to the police, he stabbed somebody that's not going to go to the police. So there's no way, nothing you could do about it. So it was just over. So he just felt bad from it, and it was a major turning point for him. He sold all his guns and everything. He said, I cannot have anything that will make me be violent at all, because I can't deal with that. And after that, he became a political leader in his community, served as the captain of the village. And after he retired from that, he is so well respected. His brother died, but he's so well respected that these tribes have wars, intertribal, constantly. And when they break out, they have to have a committee of tribal leaders, they call them the elders, to get together and come up with a resolution. Otherwise, they just have endless revenge, because their pagan traditions is revenge. And he has worked for 20 years in those tribal things, and he's probably about the most respected person in the whole Kalinga. And he teaches our faith, and he's just wonderful.
Fantastic.
I want to share one Bible story. This kind of is overall, it's become a theme for me, and I think you can easily get it, and everybody that listens can. The story of Cain and Abel. Cain recognized their problem. They needed to eat, so he planted. Now, they didn't eat meat, but Cain watched the animals anyway. And I'm sure Abel watched the animals anyway, and I'm sure that Cain thought it was rather silly. Shouldn't you be out planting so that we can eat? But he watched the animals, and when he saw the one that was perfect, he sacrificed it to God as a burnt offering. And Cain sacrificed also from what he produced. And there's 3 places in the Bible that tells us that Abel's sacrifice was respectable to God. The comments about Cain's sacrifice aren't that good. So if we just analyze that simple story, we should be able to understand that what happened is what most people are doing. What happened is Cain saw the food is important, and sacrificing for God is important too. What Abel saw is sacrificing for God is so important that even if we didn't eat, we have to do it. And when devoted Christians, I consider them devoted. They really are dedicated to being a Christian. When they work and produce for their family, all their personal needs, their home, everything they do, and then they go to church on Sunday and they give a tithe or whatever they think they should give, I think they're following the sacrifice of Cain. And we really need to move over to following the sacrifice of Abel. And if we don't see that, we miss the point of the Bible in Genesis chapter 4. What are we going to do with the rest of it? And I hope that everybody that's teaching can pick that up. And this is the number one thing that we're teaching in the Philippines. All the kids, all the adults, look at these 2 guys. Look at what they did. Why did God respect Abel's sacrifice? And how are we going to follow Abel, even if it kills us? I'll leave you with that.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Larry. And hopefully we'll be able to chat again, and blessings as you kind of recover from coming back now, and for all the ministry that you'll be doing in the future.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.